in mind, those confrontations on an international level, we cannot win with any conventional weaponry or military whatsoever. And you'll notice that we've had manifestations of this recently with the flying in of all of the top generals and, quote, our allies into a secret conference on the East Coast, and then followed shortly thereafter by a meeting between our top general and the top generals in Russia. And, no one's saying exactly what was discussed there, but military-to-military contact, to a certain extent, can be good. Also could be bad if they're in there sort of plotting as to how it's all going to lay out. The thing is, though, that the range of possibilities expands for responses to a narrowing set of circumstances after January. So in other words, we're going to get a situation where the focus is going to be economic on all things as the dollar goes into these really nasty hyperinflation-fueled. At the same time, we have deflation on a lot of goods, so it'll be a tricky period. But things that we need will be in a hyperinflationary mode. But, for instance, we may find that fuel is something we don't need because there's going to be large layoffs. And then we see that there's going to be a restructuring based on the need to know real data for the federal government. So here's our situation at the moment. We have this thing called the hedonic license that Greenspan invented years ago along with his other screwy theories that allowed them to fudge the data to make it all make sense. As it sort
hedonic, like in hedonism? How do we spell that?
Basically, at a whim, yes.
Okay.
And it was called hedonic modification. And that's what we're living under now. So, for instance, the Bureau of Lies and Statistics out there says, well, that every month we have, I don't know, some number, 87,000 new jobs created just because of the, quote, birth and death model. And it's like, if you look into it, basically they're saying, because we think it's true, we're going to tell you that every month 87,000 new jobs are created. Well, at some point this comes back to haunt the people that actually have to make decisions in a world where their funding sources are crumbling around their ears. As we know, we've got several times the global GDP in derivatives out there waiting to crash on us, and they will do so early next year.
Credit card debt first.
Correct.
And then
it's happening now. We're seeing it with the tightening.
Going to be a grim Christmas retail season, folks.
Right.
One present for each member of the family. That's it. In some cases,
you got to start looking at things differently too.
We have to. This is an austerity wake-up call.
Yeah.
For people like they've never seen before. He who has the most toys wins. Bumper stickers are headed into the trash.
Yes. We're all going to have a whole lot more real things to have to concentrate on. Yeah.
Okay. So war, in the sense of Iran, nuclear war, confrontation with Russia.
Show the data. We can be wrong, but it doesn't show.
Well, if you're not seeing anything, that's extraordinary.
No, it isn't. It isn't that we're not seeing anything, because we're seeing a very high level of concentration within the U.S. populace on things military, but it'll be degradation. But the way we're interpreting it,
all right, go ahead.
I would say it's having the need to close down hundreds of military bases and haul troops back, because we actually are at the point where pretty soon, within months, we wouldn't be able to meet a payroll. A military payroll. No one would accept the dollars. Once the Russians and the Chinese get out there and announce that they're no longer using the dollar in inter-country trade, that'll be followed by, it'll be a cascade effect, and then the only people who will be using dollars will be the U.S. And so someone will quite legitimately say to us, well, I don't want at $55 for my barrel of oil. I want 1,000 of your dollars because they're worthless. I'm not sure I can get anything at all for them. And that's realistically what has to occur, because we've sold the planet 16 or 18 or however many times the planetary GDP in absolutely toxic, worthless pieces of paper, and expected them to buy it.
Of course.
That's the curious part.
Geopolitically, militarily, there may be a vacuum created if we begin to withdraw. And the Chinese, of course, will exploit that, and others, to no end. The Chinese will love it.
Well, no, I would dispute that. I'm sorry, but
don't be sorry. Tell me. Because
my view of the Chinese goes back historically, and knowing a lot of Chinese individuals and their culture at a very different level with the language.
Will they be pulling out?
They're not territorialists. They don't really want to rule the planet.
No, I wouldn't. That's not. I'm sorry, I didn't express myself. They're investing themselves very heavily in Africa, South America. They have over 5,000 corporations and companies now owned by the PLA. They're running around the world. This is the kind of replacement of that military presence, quasi-military presence, because the military is just an agent of corporatism, that the Chinese would exploit, I would think.
That's correct. On a resource level, you're quite correct, yes. They're certainly at the level of resource competition. And this is where we get the idea that we're going to go to a calorie-based at some form of global trade levels, and it's going to be
calorie-based.
I'm sorry.
Calorie-based.
Calorie-based in the sense that all economics is basically calories. If you think about it from the beginning, you're a farmer. You have a bunch of wheat. You grow more wheat than you can use. You have excess calories to sell.
We're getting back to pies again.
Correct.
We always get back to pies.
We have a fixation, there's no question about that. Well, you live in the rain like this, you know what it's like.
I do. All right.
1 or 2 pies a day, that's not too excessive.
As long as the pie crust is vegan, that's okay.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
All right, so we're going to see some major realignments here is what you're talking about. Pretty obvious. You don't have to have tea leaves to figure that out. All you got to do is go to halfpasthuman.com and subscribe to what is, without question, the world's most fascinating reading. I've never read anything consistently more interesting or more accurate. And yes, they do make mistakes.
Oh, sure,
but
all the time.
But I wouldn't even call them mistakes. I would just call them misinterpretations, if that. But then the data, of course, could be
accurate.
Responsible.
Screw up.
Yeah, you never know. All right, back in a minute with Clif High, and do visit halfpasthuman.com, and those around there, if you've not been there, you've got a treat in store for you. Okay, as we sit on the threshold of a day tomorrow, which will be a day that will go down in history, Clif, what do you see tomorrow night? What's the data show us? Inconclusive in terms of political and governmental mechanisms, but nothing of a national catastrophe, no major rioting and so forth. That would certainly go hand in hand with the prospect of a sweep, a major victory, an unquestioned victory. One wonders if one were to add up the Nader, Ron Paul, Cynthia McKinney votes and sort of tape them together with the McCain-Palin votes, what kind of we'll know tomorrow if your projections, as you interpret them, are accurate, but nothing catastrophic.
No, and the reason really to a certain extent is the idea of harmonizing with universal archetypes and what's going on in these various cycles. If one knows how to look at time appropriately, it's rather obvious that we're in a period of transformation that's going to lead into maybe even some level of transcendental, that is to say, we'll transcend ourselves, morphing in later years. And that transformation has to start somewhere. The political process, I don't particularly like it all that much, but it's a good emotional place to get this sort of process going. And we have to harmonize with it, and we're at that point where the dollar is dying. There isn't anything we can do about that.
Well, it's kind of like sports to Americans, but sports have a different color. Yeah.
And we're at the end of a number of cycles relative to our ability to expand throughout the planet. There's only so many countries you can shove your military bases in.
We're in a we are actually, I think it's already begun, a retractive mode, although they're not pulling the soldiers out yet. But your statements, I think, are extremely interesting and very pragmatic. And I think that we know the money's gone. They're out of money. They can't keep playing these fairy games. And yet Obama wants to move into Afghanistan with more troops. He wants to cut down a few more brigades in Iraq.
Yeah, but what he wants is relatively immaterial. No matter,
what do you get? You win the Afghan war, and you get a pipeline.